The future Earth has become a dangerous place, with the air filled with deadly toxins. 83% of the population is exposed to toxic gases, and the right to breathe is tightly controlled by the Astra Corporation. The company has launched an air elixir that allows people to breathe freely in the air for 6 hours. Precious things are destined not to be cheap, and the air elixir has been speculated to astronomical prices. People never thought that one day breathing would become a luxury. Ella is a model signed by the company, dissatisfied with the advertisements she endorses. Although she is considered a supermodel in the streets and alleys, she is not living well, as people around her constantly talk about her mother. Known as a famous supermodel, the news of her taking her own life. To this day, it is still a topic of great interest. He lives under the halo of his mother, striving to find himself. Today is the anniversary of Ella's mother's death, and it is destined to be an extraordinary day. Today is also the day of a party hosted by Ella's boyfriend, Tali. He and Ella's best friend are preparing to go to the supplier for the contraband needed for the party in 7 days, and it is clear that their relationship is not simple. Ella had just finished filming a segment and could only exchange it for an air elixir. Yet some of her colleagues, facing varying degrees of hardship, chose to sell the elixir for money to make ends meet. What? In today's world, deciding how to live is something everyone must consider. Some choose to focus on their own well-being, protecting their family and pets, while others choose to publicly denounce the crimes of humanity. Ella arrived at the subway station to contact her best friend. She didn't plan to attend the party that night. She just wanted to go home and sleep. Meanwhile, the two of them had already entered the supplier's home, where the company's CEO, Connor, was being interviewed on TV. A viewer named Lazarus called in to expose the recent robbery incident at the company. The air elixir produced by the joint company is actually limited in quantity, far from enough to supply the world. The company is heavily criticized for its high prices, serving only the upper class, while neglecting the safety of the lower class. The call was forcibly cut off, and Connor stated that the company would do its best to increase production. Meanwhile, Tali had already sneaked into the laboratory on purpose and witnessed the experimental process of the new drug. Seeing them carefully extract a drop for consumption, Tali took advantage of their unawareness and secretly hid a vial of the drug on herself. The two of them left without a trace. Little did he know that the drug he stole would bring him catastrophic disaster. On the way back, Connor harbored resentment over the recent interview. The Emperor of Summer had traced Lazarus's IP address. He was not Dukhan and had already planted spies outside the supplier's premises. He knew it was these people who had stolen the company's drugs, so the research in the supplier's laboratory was not just about contraband. Ella returned home and looked at herself once again on a magazine cover with her mother. Since the company wanted her to wear the necklace in the picture, Booker used this famous scene to squeeze out the last bit of value from the Queen Mother. Her father called at the right moment. On such an important day, he was tied up with work and couldn't get away, which was a directive full of preaching. Ella, don't be alone today. In a fit of pique, Ella decided to attend tonight's Maitreya party, only to unexpectedly catch her boyfriend cheating with her best friend Tali in the bathroom, carefully extracting a drop of potion. Tali intended to have her best friend try the sample, but was interrupted by Ella's arrival. Faced with questioning, Tali had no intention of arguing and left directly, leaving Ella alone in the bathroom. In a fit of rage, she grabbed the unknown potion from the floor and drank it in one gulp, unaware that she had opened Pandora's box. Before she could enjoy the party for long, she felt unwell and rushed to the bathroom to retch, once again interrupting a couple's intimate moment. The man intended to seize this opportunity, but was vomited on by Ella. She still wouldn't give up until Ella harshly scolded her away. As young people, some indulge in their youth, while others spend their time on research. The 63rd toxic gas experiment on lab mice failed. Now he couldn't see himself smashing the tablet in frustration. Although Lazarus was right, the company could no longer produce. Angela, the assistant for the air elixir, arrived just in time to report on the progress of tracking Lazarus's IP location, but Connor had no interest in these trivial matters and advised her to go home quickly. Things weren't going well for Ella either. She fainted several times and regained consciousness, feeling unbearably hot all over. She had no choice but to fill a tub with cold water to cool herself down. Pali realized he left the stolen medicine in the bathroom and cried out. Just as he was about to go back to retrieve it, he ran into a group of suppliers who had been chasing him. Cornered in the bathroom and beaten, he had no choice but to admit he had stolen the pharmaceutical agent. However, now he didn't know who had taken it. The group split up to search, looking for anyone showing symptoms of having taken the medicine. Tali, who stayed in the bathroom, discovered Ella hiding in the bathtub. He clearly realized that what he had just consumed was not normal, and was about to ask exactly what it was. He was mercilessly locked in by Tali. When Tali called the others, they only found an empty bathroom. with no trace of Ella. Without a doubt, Tali was in for another beating. However, this time, she managed to grab the opponent's handgun. Before she could confront them, the group rushed in to seize it. Amidst the chaos, the handgun accidentally discharged, and he was shot in the thigh, bleeding profusely, and fainting on the spot. In the urgency of the situation, finding the person who took the medication was more important. The group set out again to find the researcher, but Solomon stayed behind to stop Tali's bleeding. He wasn't sure if the new drug he developed would work, but his assistant was convinced of its efficacy. After finishing the treatment, Solomon took the keys from Tali and locked him inside the room. When Tali opened his eyes in the manor, he was startled to find Ella hiding in the skylight in a strange position. She jumped down and attempted to unlock the door, but to no avail. In a fit of pique, a single punch unexpectedly smashed the door to pieces, leaving both of them stunned. Mira consoled herself, saying it was the adrenaline at work. Seeing the exit, someone pulled Mira back into the bathroom, using a hairdryer to fiercely smash the skylight. Terry said it was super thick reinforced glass that humans couldn't possibly break. Yet Ella directly hit it. However, she didn't forget about the toxic air outside and took out an air elixir, giving one to Terry. The two of them successfully escaped to the rooftop. Terry, however, failed to jump due to his leg injury. In a moment of desperation, Ella reached out to help, but spikes suddenly extended from her palm, firmly attaching to Terry's chest. This scene was witnessed by her friend downstairs, and Solomon and his assistant, who were guarding below, had also arrived. Terry told Ella to run first and not to worry about him, but he accidentally lost his footing and fell from the rooftop. Solomon had already guessed that it was Ella's doing. He was shocked to find that he had completely finished his liver. Faced with Solomon's offer of help, Ella didn't believe it at all. She leapt off the rooftop, landing steadily, just in time to meet her approaching friend. After the recent incident, her friend was convinced that Ella had pushed Terry down. With pursuers on her tail, Ella didn't have time to explain and ran straight into the dense forest. However, her friend didn't call an ambulance first, but instead called the police. As Ella climbed over the courtyard wall, she came face to face with a car. She fainted instantly under the strong light. The driver was the man from the party. In the early morning, the police investigated the accident from last night, and the informant tracking Solomon all night also reported to Connor about their pursuit of a girl. The man who took Ella home had no good intentions. He was about to commit an indecent act but was struck hard in the face by the awakened Ella. Seeing the spikes protruding from Ella's elbow, May fled in fright and anger. Ella herself didn't know what was happening to her body, looking at her elbow and wrist in the mirror. It had already started to fester, and chitinous bone spurs were protruding from the wound, resembling insect appendages. With a cry of determination, Ella cut them off with scissors, picked up the man's clothes, and fled to the street. Seeing her radiant image on the screen, Ella feared she might never return to her original form. She decided to seek help at the hospital, which was filled with lower-class people harmed by the toxic air, unable to afford air remedies. They could only wait for death to come. The overwhelmed doctors, seeing that Ella could breathe normally, did not intend to give her any special treatment. However, they were shocked by the sight of the mottled blood vessels on her face, and loudly called for security to isolate her. With no other choice, Ella had to flee, running all the way to the isolation ward. Using the barbs protruding from her hands, she climbed up the wall and clung firmly to the ceiling. The little girl in the hospital bed did not intend to reveal Ella to the guards. She simply thought an angel had come to take her to heaven. Upon learning that the little girl could only wait for death due to a lack of treatment, Ella gave her all the elixirs she had. The little girl was not wrong. She truly encountered her angel. Connor found the sheriff and obtained all the information about the case, including the testimony of the man accidentally injured by Ella. In return, Connor would deliver a batch of air elixirs to the sheriff's home. Meanwhile, Solomon also discovered the bone spurs cut by Ella at the man's house. The assistant was right. The potion she researched really worked. With nowhere else to turn, Ella could only seek help from her best friend. Her friend was on high alert upon seeing her, as who wouldn't be afraid of a murderer? However, Ella had no intention of harming her. Her body was still continuously changing, and later, rows of holes even grew along with Borg. He could only use foundation to cover the abnormalities of his skin, but the more pressing issue was his nearsightedness. Now he only wanted to eat meat, eh? His bewildered best friend questioned her about what was going on, but was left speechless upon seeing Ella's wound. If it wasn't for Ella, then last night's victim could only have been the best friend herself. The two erupted into a fierce argument about friendship and betrayal, about pride and inferiority, about the genuine care of a best friend and one's own dependence, and about the hysteria after the truth was shattered. During the argument, Ella became so emotional that she accidentally cut off the power to the microwave. At that moment, Solomon's voice sounded, once again offering to help her arrange a meeting with Ella alone at the warehouse entrance. After hanging up the phone, Ella could only gnaw on raw meat. Her best friend suggested calling the police, but Ella sternly stopped her. It had just been mentioned on the phone that if they called the police, they would no longer help her. Her best friend was thoroughly frightened by Ella. This unfamiliar and savage Ella seemed like a monster. Faced with her best friend's misunderstanding, Ella knew it was over between them. She went to the warehouse alone and successfully met Solomon. After confirming she came alone, he immediately kidnapped her. When Ella woke up again, she found herself tied to a chair. After struggling to no avail, she remembered the sharp barbs on her wrist, which were controlled by her thoughts, and easily cut through the zip ties. Ella had just freed herself from the ties, but an uncontrollable hunger prevented her from escaping. It made her grab raw meat drenched in syrup and chew it without hesitation. Jin Shizhong heard Solomon and his assistant approaching from afar. Ella raised her knife in defense, feeling agitated at the sight of the culprits behind everything. "It's all thanks to you that I'm in this state now," she exclaimed. Solomon merely stated that it was normal metabolism. His body needed this energy. A SWAT team burst through the door, interrupting the standoff between the two sides. The assistant had already fled moments earlier, leaving Ella and Solomon to be captured and brought to justice. In the Peking opera, the hole at the back of Ella's neck grew deeper, and her ears began to fester. It itched unbearably, and when she reached to scratch, she ended up tearing off her own ear, which was replaced by a pair of bizarrely shaped, colorful frost patterns. Connor entered the prison, faced his boss Ella, and showed her his transformation. His nostrils and lips were cracked, and his facial skin emitted a brilliant glow. The highly intelligent Connor had already figured out the gist of it. He directly took 2 people from the police station as an exchange, promising to send a batch of empty spirit medicine to the sheriff's cousin in Germany. Back at the research institute, Ella accepted Connor's offer of help and cooperated with her in conducting clinical trials. Based on the extracted gene sequence, it could be determined that Ella at this point could no longer be called human. Instead, she resembled more of an insect. Connor found Solomon's special formula in the basement, which she had successfully developed. It was her own benevolence that led her to deliberately let them steal the medicine for research. This is how the current results were achieved. Or Solomon should be sensible and join the company to enjoy the world together. However, after enduring numerous tortures, Solomon never gave in. He was unwilling to let his research be plagiarized by the company and become a tool for the elite to control the world. Life itself has no hierarchy or distinction of nobility. Living healthily is a right everyone should enjoy. With negotiations failing, Solomon still couldn't escape the torture. The company had no choice but to find a way through Ella, who revealed everything. Solomon successfully decomposed a genetic combination that could neutralize the toxins in the atmosphere. Ella's own DNA had already combined with another foreign DNA, altering her genome. Now, her body can automatically produce the bioenzyme that neutralizes toxins in the air. In other words, Ella has successfully achieved a high-dimensional evolution of the species. However, this evolution is irreversible, and although she cannot return to being the beautiful model she once was, but Ella has a better choice. As long as she cooperates with the company to complete the experiment and replicate Solomon's formula, she can save the world and benefit humanity. After years of subtle indoctrination by the company, Ella has become unwaveringly loyal to them. Reflecting on her own family background, she finally has the option to be herself. So, amidst Connor's sweet talk, Ella signed the agreement without hesitation. The company began conducting reckless experiments. Connor locked Ella in a room filled with toxic gas, yet Ella emerged unscathed. In her sleep, Ella was awakened by the sound of conversations outside the isolation chamber. Her evolved hearing had far surpassed that of ordinary people, but Connor was unaware of this ability. Thus, he revealed his plan to the old chairman right in front of her. He intended to extract reagents from Ella's genome to complete the mass production of the air elixir. This was Connor's primary goal. The gene replication training was merely a precaution to ensure that before he was exhausted, as a means of sustainable development, he could replicate this plan in another species. The old chairman brought up the missing persons report submitted by Ella's father. Connor, however, was indifferent. Ella's case of being entangled and fleeing in fear of punishment was a long-standing situation, and the sheriff had already been bribed by him, ensuring the whole family could enjoy a lifetime supply of the elixir, leaving no worries at all. Hearing this, Ella could no longer hold back. It turned out that she was not a partner in the experiment, but simply used as a tool for it. She banged on the glass forcefully, questioning whether what Connor said was true. As Connor, of Asian descent, realized Ella could hear him, he ordered the release of the sedative. Filled with regret and anger, Ella fainted as the gas was released. Meanwhile, Solomon's assistant had disguised as a transport staff member and infiltrated the company. Medical personnel arrived at the isolation room, ready to administer medication to Ella, to look down and find that the restraints on her hands had already been cut. Then, they subdued one person and stepped forward to threaten and inquire about Solomon's whereabouts. The control room discovered Ella's violent actions and immediately sounded the alarm. However, Ella remained calm, used a medical staff member's fingerprint to unlock, and left leisurely. Connor had just picked up her son at the airport when she heard the news of Ella's escape, prompting her to rush back in a hurry. Ella had already reached the basement and could clearly hear Solomon's breathing through the wall. At this moment, a burly man came to investigate, attracted by the clothes on the ground. Finally, she leisurely put on her clothes, leapt forward to snatch the gun, and knocked him out with the butt of the gun. Everything happened in a flash as she opened the confinement door. Solomon was stunned by Ella, who seemed like a superwoman. She knew her potion was successful, but she didn't expect it to be this successful. Ella questioned her why she didn't share the formula with Connor. Solomon explained that she just wanted to provide it for free to everyone, but Ella didn't want to be part of this grand plan. She had transformed into this state under the influence of the potion, but Solomon only said that this was just a side effect, and then insisted on taking Ella to prove the actual value of the potion. The two of them arrived at a ventilation shaft, and Ella climbed directly onto the wall and crawled inside, leaving Solomon in awe. The side effect is really convenient. Ella, however, remarked that you were once not a model. Back at the company, Connor handed his son over to Angela for care, and then immediately gathered the guards to start a pursuit. Meanwhile, the assistant had already arrived in the basement and set up the bomb, calling the company to announce her presence and draw everyone's attention. Angela promptly reported this news to Connor, strongly urging the evacuation of the building. With no other choice, the university had to agree. Even in this situation, he didn't forget about his son. At this moment, he was in the office, bored, when the explosion sounded, startling him into a panic. Ella and her brother also heard the explosion. However, they had more important matters to attend to. Solomon revealed to Ella that the active ingredient of the air elixir actually comes from an endangered dragonfly species in South Africa. This dragonfly can be immune to toxins in the air, but Connor's experiment led to the complete extinction of this species. This is also why the air elixir can no longer be produced. So Connor could only pin his hopes on Ella, but Ella didn't want to turn into this ghostly form, or rather this dragonfly form. Hated by everyone, yet Solomon found Ella to be indescribably beautiful. This wasn't out of a fondness for his own creation, but a genuine affection. For so many years, Ella had been catering to the public and pleasing others, wrapping her true self in layers, yet yearning for true love. But from Solomon's perspective, only she could be her own salvation. With a smaller explosion, the two immediately continued to flee. They returned to the office, only to find that their son was already missing. Angela, who forgot to lock the door, kept apologizing, but it was to no avail. The two in the basement initially planned to ambush the guards, but failed and unexpectedly ran into the assistant who came to rescue them. At this moment, violence had already begun within the company, and prolonged exposure to the toxic air was bound to be life-threatening. The three of them retreated while hiding, and suddenly discovered Connor's son, hiding in the bathroom, the boy's eyes wide open. Looking at the beautiful Ella in front of him, he asked if she was a fairy. A child's compliment is the purest. Ella was moved and gave an affirmative answer. During their escape, the four of them ran into Connor and Ella, who were in pursuit, and learned about their relationship. Connor raised a tranquilizer gun, demanding Ella hand over the formula. Meanwhile, Suraman and the other person had already taken advantage of the distraction to head down to the elevator to wait. Ella softly comforted the boy, telling him not to move. After speaking, she suddenly extended a spike to threaten Connor. Connor still tried to brainwash him, bluntly stating that if he left here, he would be seen as a monster. But Ella had already fully accepted herself and was completely unmoved. Seeing Ella's firm resolve, Connor angrily fired his gun.
She's a fairy!
Connor ran out of the building and ordered the block to be locked down. The assistant had already driven through the crowd, broke through the gate, and left, but the car tire was unfortunately shot and burst, causing it to flip over. In the end, they rushed forward, only to find the assistant alone. Alra and Solomon had already escaped far away. Facing the tall barbed wire on the outer wall, Solomon suggested climbing over it, but Ella simply extended her elbow spikes. With one strike, a large gap was cut open, and the two immediately escaped. The pursuing guards could only call for reinforcements, which gave the lone assistant a chance to hitch a ride. He feigned illness, and when the opponent approached, he strangled them unconscious. After all, being involved in the underworld, how could he manage without some tricks? Ella and Solomon began their grand escape in the sunlight. They ran to the top of the canyon bridge, but the mortal Solomon couldn't keep up with Ella's speed. He couldn't start the pursuit, but Ella could. He had already completed a glorious evolution, and the vast world was his to roam. He handed the last vial to Ella, instructing him to find Lazarus with it, and the subsequent research would be completed with his cooperation. Ella also gave the Queen Mother's relic to Solovey. From today on, she would live her own life. Then she leapt off the bridge, disappearing into the sea of clouds, with only the sound of wings flapping, echoing across the sky. The so-called were taken away by Connor, and the story was far from over. The assistant's live broadcast of self-experimentation was played on every screen in the street. He intended to use this to promote the new drug they developed, and the first beneficiary of the drug stood up on the rooftop to show his arrival at the meeting point with Lazarus. No one would have guessed that the other party was actually Connor's assistant. One is Angela, the mastermind behind the revolution. And although there is still a long way to go, it doesn't matter, because they have Ella, who has already completed her evolution. This film is the latest sci-fi movie released in 2024, and the concept of biochemical mutants is refreshing. The exploration of environmental and social issues is also thought-provoking. Under such circumstances, one can either wait for extinction or fiercely resist fate. Everyone is fortunate, transforming from a manipulated vase into a butterfly, evolving into a new life. Although his future life will be even more exciting. The technology of genetic recombination actually exists today, but it is mostly used in plants and for self-immune rejection responses. The evolution depicted in the film still presents insurmountable challenges today. Asu also fantasized about combining and recombining his genes with those of fish, allowing him to breathe underwater. For those who are unaware, what are your thoughts after watching this film? Feel free to leave a comment for discussion. Alright, today's journey ends here. The launch has also opened up new industries for everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and like for our next destination. Goodbye. Soon.